The gulls were louder that afternoon. Their cries tore through the calm rhythm of the tide, echoing across the empty stretch of sand below her window. The old woman sat in her faded armchair, the same one her husband had fixed a dozen times, her fingers tracing the cracked armrest as if the wood still held his warmth. The house smelled faintly of salt and lemon polish, a scent that used to mean home. Now it only smelled like memory. The phone rang once. Then again, shrill, insistent. She almost didn't answer. Her heart had learned to fear long silences and unexpected calls. But habit made her reach for it, the cord tangling around her wrist like a soft warning. "Hello." "Mom," the voice said, quick, breathless. Her daughter never called her mom anymore unless she wanted something. "We're going tomorrow. I've sold your beach house." The words slid through the receiver like cold metal. For a second she thought she'd misheard. The surf outside roared in her ears, drowning out sense. But the voice continued, efficient, practical, businesslike. "The buyers are coming early. You should start packing up whatever you want to keep. It's a good price, Mom. You'll thank me later." She stared out the window, eyes fixed on the horizon, the color of dull pewter. "Sold," she whispered. "Yes, we'll move you into the condo in town. It'll be easier for you. Safer." Safer, the word scraped against her ribs. It meant smaller, quieter, invisible. There was a long pause, not from confusion, but from clarity. Something deep inside her, something patient and old, finally stopped waiting. Her voice was soft when it came. "I see." On the other end, her daughter exhaled in relief. "Good, I knew you. Understand, I'll handle the paperwork." The line went dead before the old woman could respond. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, layered like the ocean before a storm. She set the phone down gently, as though afraid of waking something. Her hand lingered on the receiver, trembling faintly. Then she folded both hands in her lap and stared at the water through the rain-streaked glass. She had built this home with her husband. Every wall, every nail, every patch of chipped paint had a story. They'd laughed here, fought here, dreamed here. And when he died, she promised him she would never leave, not until the sea forgot their names. Now her daughter had sold it like a used car. She rose slowly, the weight of years pressing on her spine. The wooden floor creaked beneath her bare feet, familiar and faithful. She crossed the small living room, her gaze catching the details she'd once stopped noticing, the dent in the coffee table, the faint water stain on the ceiling shaped like a heart, the framed photo of their first summer after the house was finished. She touched the picture lightly. He was smiling, sunburned, his arms slung around her shoulders. His eyes still held the sky. "I suppose she needed the money," she murmured. "Our little girl always needed more." The wind pushed against the windows, as if the sea itself wanted to answer. She moved to the dresser near the hallway. On top sat a dusty seashell bowl, a stack of unpaid utility bills and a small brass key. Her fingers hovered over the key, then stopped. It was for the drawer she'd locked decades ago, the one she had sworn never to open unless the day came when everything she loved was taken from her. Maybe that day was now. She sat down on the edge of the bed, listening to the distant thunder rolling over the horizon. The air was thick, damp with memory. For a long time she just breathed in and out, steadying herself, feeling the faint pulse of the world move through her. She thought of the last real conversation she'd had with her daughter years ago on this same porch. The younger woman had been talking about selling the beach property even then, calling it wasted space. The mother had said gently, "This house isn't just wood and nails, it's what's left of us." Her daughter had laughed, impatient. "Mom, sentiment doesn't pay bills." Now that laugh echoed in her skull like a closing door. She rose, took the brass key and walked to the old oak cabinet in the corner. Her knees ached, but her steps were deliberate. The drawer's lock resisted at first, stiff from disuse. Then it turned with a low, metallic sigh. Inside lay a small box wrapped in faded blue cloth, untouched since the day her husband died. Her throat tightened. She unfolded the cloth carefully, like peeling back the years. The box was ordinary, wooden, its corners worn smooth by time. She remembered his hands sanding it in the workshop, humming to himself, refusing to say what it was for. Her fingers brushed the lid. Outside, lightning flashed across the sea, a white scar splitting the clouds. The room filled with brief, trembling light. She hesitated just for a heartbeat, then lifted the lid. Whatever lay inside, it wasn't money. It wasn't jewels, it was something far heavier. Her breath caught as she looked down. The ocean thundered louder, closer, like it had been waiting for this moment too. She placed the phone back in its cradle, her face unreadable in the half-dark. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "All right, my love, I suppose it's time." And with steady hands, she opened the drawer she promised never to touch again. The house breathed around her. Not loudly, not like the restless tide outside, but softly, as if inhaling the years she'd lived within its walls. The wind moved through the cracks of the window frames like an old friend too shy to knock. Somewhere above, the rafters whispered. She stood in the middle of the living room, her palms resting on the back of the rocking chair. The wood was smooth, polished by decades of quiet movement, the rhythm of bedtime stories, of long evenings when her husband would hum nonsense tunes to their little girl until she drifted to sleep. Now, when it creaked, it wasn't music, it was memory. The house was small, modest, but every inch of it was alive with echoes. On the mantel, seashells her daughter had collected on her 8th birthday, each one tagged in her child's handwriting, Mom's, Dad's, mine. The letters had faded, but the shells still shimmered faintly when the light hit them. Next to them, a photo, the three of them standing knee-deep in the surf. The husband's arm around his wife, their daughter perched on his shoulders, her hair a golden blur in the wind. The picture had warped slightly with the salt air, curling at the edges, but the joy inside it remained untouched. She touched the frame with 2 fingers. "Do you remember?" she whispered. The memory rose up instantly, as vivid as the day itself. The heat of the sand, the laughter that carried over the waves, her husband shouting, "Catch her, June," as their daughter ran barefoot into her arms, dripping wet and fearless. Love had been simple then, a rhythm, not a transaction. Now, the same walls that once held their laughter held only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant hiss of the ocean. She moved through each room as if she were walking through chapters of a book she could never finish. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon and sea salt. The wooden table bore a long scar from the time her husband had dropped a hot pan during one of his culinary experiments. She teased him about it for weeks. "You nearly branded the poor thing." He had grinned and said, "Every home needs a scar to prove it's lived." Her lips twitched at the memory. He'd been right. The bedroom was dim. She opened the curtains, letting in the honey-coloured light of late afternoon. Dust swirled like ghostly dancers caught in the golden beam. On the dresser sat his watch, stopped forever at 2:17, the hour the world had gone quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, the same way she had that night all those years ago. The night the hospital had called. The night her daughter had said, through tears, "We'll take care of you, Mom, you'll never be alone." Promises, so fragile when spoken. She closed her eyes. Time folded back on itself. The present dissolved, replaced by laughter, sunlight, and the smell of his aftershave. She saw him in the garden, hands deep in the soil, planting marigolds by the porch. "They're stubborn flowers," he'd said, smiling. "They bloom even when the world gives them no reason to." She laughed at him then, calling him sentimental. Now she understood it wasn't sentiment, it was faith. The faith that love, real love, doesn't rot with the body. She rose and walked into the small study, his study. It hadn't changed since the day he left. Books lined the walls, their spines cracked and faded. A model ship sat unfinished on the desk, sails half-tied, dusted with time. The sight of it broke something soft inside her. He had planned to finish it next summer. There had been no next summer. Her fingers brushed against the drawer under the desk. It didn't open easily. She knew why. The bottom panel was false. She and her husband had built it together, hiding a small compartment beneath it, for important things, he'd said with a wink. She knelt, pried up the wooden lip, and there it was, the hidden space. Inside lay a folded envelope, yellowed with age. Across the front, his handwriting, "For when love is tested." She didn't open it, not yet. Her heart wasn't ready to hear his voice again, not in words, not tonight. She replaced the panel and stood, steadying herself with a slow breath. Her reflection in the glass cabinet caught her eye, silver hair-lined face, but the same quiet strength he used to trace with his fingers. "You look like the sea," he'd once told her. "Beautiful because you change, not despite it." The clock ticked softly behind her. Outside, the waves rolled in steady rhythm, dragging the daylight out to sea. The air in the room grew cooler, touched with the scent of salt and twilight. She walked back to the living room. The sky had turned the colour of old bruises, purple and grey bleeding into orange. She lit a single lamp, the glow trembling against the walls. The shadows of the furniture stretched long and thin, like memories reaching for her. She sat again in her husband's rocking chair and let it move beneath her. Each creak was a heartbeat, each sway a sigh. The ocean outside was calm now, but its silence felt watchful, expectant. Her gaze drifted toward the corner where the hidden compartment lay, the one only she and her husband had known about. The one holding the deed, untouched, unseen. Safe. Her daughter could sell a story, but not the truth. The house didn't belong to her, not really. It belonged to the promise they had made here, the life they had built, the love that refused to leave. She let her fingers rest on the armrest, her voice barely a whisper. "You'll keep my secret one more time, won't you?" The house didn't answer, but the sea did a soft crash against the shore, as if it were nodding. The morning began with the hum of tires on gravel. Slow at first, a distant murmur rolling through the salt-heavy air, then louder, more insistent. The gulls scattered from the roof, startled by the metallic groan of a moving truck laboring up the narrow driveway. From her window, she watched the vehicle crawl forward like a reluctant beast. A cloud of dust rose behind it, curling into the sunlight. Her daughter stepped out first. Crisp linen shirt, sunglasses perched high on her head, hair cut into the kind of short, professional bob that suggested time was always money. Her son-in-law followed, phone in hand, already half engaged in a conversation that had nothing to do with her. They looked out of place here. The beach wind tangled their careful composure, and the smell of seaweed clung to their clothes. The daughter shaded her eyes. "Mom, we made it." The older woman smiled faintly, her expression calm, almost serene. "I see that." The son-in-law gave a curt nod. "Quite a drive, you really are far out here." "Yes," she said, "that's the point." He didn't respond. They climbed the porch steps, their shoes echoing against the wood that had weathered every season of her life. Her daughter looked around the small sitting room with a sigh that sounded almost rehearsed. "It's just as I remembered. Cozy." "Old," her husband corrected, though softly. The mother said nothing. She only gestured toward the sofa, the same faded blue one that had carried decades of quiet evenings. "Sit, you must be tired." But they didn't sit. They hovered, restless, distracted, all polite concern and no real comfort. Her daughter set her purse down with a careful precision that betrayed her nerves. "Mom," she began, "I know this feels sudden, but we've been thinking about what's best for you. You're alone here and, well, maintaining a house like this, it's a lot. You deserve ease, a simpler life." The words were practiced, almost corporate, the kind people use when they've already made peace with their guilt. Her mother nodded, her face unreadable. "Simpler," she echoed softly, "that's what you want for me." "What we want," the daughter corrected gently, "is for you to be comfortable. The retirement home near us is beautiful, Mom. Gardens, activities, full-time care, everything you'd ever need. This place," she gestured vaguely around them, "it's falling apart." The older woman's gaze drifted to the photograph on the mantel, her husband's hand over hers, both of them laughing, caught mid-motion. "It's held together just fine until now." Her daughter looked away, busying herself by straightening a stack of old letters. "We already talked to the realtor," she continued, her tone light, too light. "The sale closes tomorrow. The movers will handle everything. You'll be settled in no time." The mother smiled. It wasn't bitter, it was almost kind. The sort of smile one wears when watching someone walk into a storm they think is sunshine. "How thoughtful," she said quietly. The son-in-law cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "We really did try to make the best decision, Mrs. Carter. You'll see it's for the better." She turned her eyes on him, not sharp, not angry, but deep enough to make him falter. "I'm sure it is." Then she stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "Would you like some tea?" They exchanged quick glances, relieved by the small normalcy of it. "That would be lovely," her daughter said, forcing a smile. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed as she filled it. The walls seemed to listen. The faint smell of sea salt hung in the air, and the old clock ticked, patient and steady. Her reflection in the kettle's curve looked calm, but her mind was already at work, a quiet, methodical rhythm beneath her stillness. She opened the top drawer. Inside lay a single sealed envelope, the paper thick and ivory-coloured. Her daughter's name was written across the front in her husband's handwriting, not hers. She ran her thumb over the ink, remembering the night they'd written it together. He had insisted, after his diagnosis, that there be no confusion later. He'd called it insurance against forgetfulness. At the time, she thought he meant his memory. Now she realized he had meant theirs. She closed the drawer carefully, covering the envelope with a folded dish towel. Not yet, she told herself. Not until the last box is gone. Back in the living room, her daughter was on the phone, briskly coordinating with the movers outside. Yes, the antiques go to storage. No, not the photo albums, those come with us, thank you. Her mother set down the tea tray. You're very efficient, she said softly. Her daughter laughed lightly, almost with pride. Someone has to be, you always taught me to handle things practically, remember? The words landed like stones in the quiet. Yes, the older woman replied, pouring tea with a steady hand. I remember. They sat together, sipping in polite silence. The only sound was the clink of porcelain and the distant thud of footsteps as movers carried her life, piece by piece, out the door. Through the window she watched the truck fill. Her husband's chair, the lamp that had lit their wedding photos, the chest that still smelled faintly of cedar and old summers. Every thump of the boxes sounded like a heartbeat leaving the house. Her daughter reached across the table, resting her hand on her mother. You'll see, Mom, this will be good for you, a fresh start. The older woman's eyes met hers, calm and unblinking. Fresh, she murmured. Yes, sometimes the tide needs to sweep things clean before they can grow again. Her daughter smiled, not quite understanding. When the truck doors finally slammed shut, the sound echoed through the house like the closing of a book. The son-in-law called out from the porch, We'll be ready to go in 10 minutes. Her daughter stood, smoothing her blouse. You should pack whatever you'll need tonight, the rest will be delivered next week. The mother nodded, rising slowly. I'll be just a minute. She walked back into the kitchen. The kettle was still warm, the drawer still slightly ajar. She took the envelope in her hand for a moment, feeling its weight, the truth sealed inside. Then she slid it back into the drawer, this time more carefully, pressing it beneath a small stack of dish towels. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. There you go, my love, she whispered under her breath, everything in its right place. When she returned, her daughter was waiting by the door, purse in hand. All set. Almost, the mother said. I just needed to say goodbye. She looked around the room one last time, the soft light, the fading smell of salt and tea, the sea just beyond the window. The house was quiet but not defeated. It would wait, it always had. She turned to her daughter with that same calm smile. Ready when you are. Outside, the wind had changed. The evening arrived slow and golden, the kind that made the ocean blush under the dying sun. Through the kitchen window, the sea shimmered like liquid bronze, too beautiful for what the night held. The table was set the way she always did when she wanted to remember who she once was. Linen napkins, mismatched plates, the old candle holders her husband had carved from driftwood. It wasn't much of a celebration, but it had the stillness of ceremony. Her daughter entered first, carrying a salad bowl, trying too hard to look cheerful. Thought I'd help out tonight, she said. You've done enough. Her mother smiled faintly. Have I? The son-in-law followed, balancing a bottle of wine, his thumb flicking across his phone even as he sat. I'll open this, he said without looking up. The cork popped, sharp and final. They ate to the sound of the sea, forks against plates, a gull crying somewhere above, the wind teasing the curtains. It could have been any other dinner on any other night, if not for the invisible tension woven through every breath. Do you remember the last time we ate out here? The mother asked quietly. Her daughter's fork hesitated mid-air. It must have been years ago. Your father's birthday, she said. He wanted grilled fish, but the storm ruined the fire pit, so we made soup instead. You insisted on decorating the table with seashells. The daughter smiled faintly, almost with embarrassment. I was a kid. You were happy, her mother said simply. Silence again, the wind pushed harder at the window. Her son-in-law cleared his throat. You've kept this place in good shape, it's impressive, really. She tilted her head. Homes respond to how they're treated, she said. This one has been loved. He nodded absently, already glancing at his phone again. Her daughter spoke softly. Mom, it's just a house. Walls, wood, sand underneath. You always said things don't last forever. The older woman's gaze lingered on her. No, it's not just a house. She took a slow sip of wine. It's a mirror. Her daughter frowned. A mirror. Yes, her voice was quiet, but it carried. It reflects what we are when no one's looking. Every fight, every kindness, every secret. This place remembers everything. The words hovered like sea mist, soft but impossible to ignore. Her daughter forced a small laugh, trying to shake it off. You always talk like that, poetic, mysterious. You should have been a writer. Maybe I was, her mother said, smiling thinly. The air thickened. Conversation stumbled forward in half-hearted bursts. Talk of the weather, the new neighborhood, how wonderful the assisted living facility would be. Each sentence felt like a brick laid between them. When dessert came, a simple slice of lemon pie, her husband's favorite, the daughter pushed her plate away after one bite. Too sweet, she murmured. Her mother chuckled softly. He used to say that too, only he meant me. Her daughter looked down, the joke landing too close to something real. The waves outside grew louder, impatient. The son-in-law stood to clear the table, eager to escape the thick silence. I'll get these, he said quickly. No, the mother said, her tone light but firm. Leave them, tonight I'll clean. Her daughter looked at her with a flicker of concern. You don't have to. I do, she interrupted gently. Some things you have to do yourself. She began stacking plates with slow, deliberate movements. Her daughter busied herself packing away a few stray items from the counter, a photo frame, an old clock. The kind of small, personal things that disappear when people help. When she turned, her mother was watching her. You've always been good at tidying things up, she said softly, even memories. Her daughter froze, unsure how to respond. The mother smiled again, that same gentle, unsettling calm. But this house, it's stubborn. It doesn't forget as easily as people do. The sound of the waves filled the space between them, deep and rhythmic. The candle flickered, and for a heartbeat the room looked almost sacred, like an altar built for something ending. Her daughter exhaled shakily. Mom, please don't make this harder than it is. Harder, the mother set the final plate down and looked at her fully, her eyes sharp but kind. You're taking the roof that kept your father's dreams dry, the floor where you took your first steps. You're selling the sea that taught you patience, and I'm the one making it hard. Her daughter's lips trembled. We're doing what's best for you. No, her mother said softly, you're doing what's easiest for you. Her daughter stood then, gripping the back of her chair. I don't want to fight. Neither do I, her mother said. That's why I'm done talking. The son-in-law re-entered, awkwardly holding the bottle of wine. Everything all right? Perfect, the mother said. We were just finishing. She took her glass, filled it halfway, and lifted it toward them both. Her hand was steady, her smile serene. To new beginnings, she said. They hesitated before raising their glasses too. To new beginnings, her daughter echoed, voice tight. The glasses touched, crystal on crystal. Her mother held the moment just a little too long, the faintest glint of something unreadable in her eyes. Then she sipped, slow and calm, watching them over the rim of her glass. Outside, the ocean rolled closer to shore, relentless, as if waiting for permission to rise. Her daughter reached for her bag, muttering something about early mornings and movers. Her husband checked the door lock. The older woman remained seated, still smiling, the candlelight catching the wet shimmer in her gaze. As they disappeared down the hall, her voice drifted softly after them, not quite loud enough to be heard clearly, but enough for the walls to remember. That night, after the clinking of dishes had faded and the last echo of her daughter's laughter dissolved into the sea air, the house grew still again, the kind of stillness that hums. The kind that listens. She moved through the hallway in her slippers, her hand brushing lightly against the walls as though greeting old friends. Each room held the ghosts of conversations long ended. His voice reading the paper by the fire, her daughter's childhood giggles, the soft murmur of a marriage lived in quiet devotion. The lamp on the hallway table flickered once, and in that trembling light her eyes settled on the photograph, her wedding day. The frame was simple but elegant, the glass slightly fogged from age. Behind it her own reflection stared back, blurred by time. She picked it up, thumb brushing the edge. The faintest smile crossed her face. 15 years, she whispered. You were always the wiser one. The memory came back slow, like the tide creeping toward shore. He had been sitting right there in that armchair, a blanket over his knees, the steady rhythm of the sea outside matching the shallow pace of his breath. The doctor had said months, maybe less, but he was never one for deadlines. She'd been sorting papers on the table, insurance, wills, bank statements, all the sterile language of an ending. He watched her with that faint, mischievous smile that even illness couldn't dim. You're too quiet, he said. I'm counting numbers I can't bear to face, she replied softly. He chuckled, then stopped counting. Let's write something worth leaving behind. She looked up. The will is already written. Yes, he said, his eyes glinting, but not the truth. That night, they'd worked side by side under the low light of the dining room lamp. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was steady, defiant, as if it could rewrite fate itself. 2 versions of everything. One to satisfy the lawyers, the bankers, the dutiful daughter who already spoke of responsibility with rehearsed sincerity. And another, handwritten, signed in private, witnessed by the notary who'd loved them like family, the real document. It declared that the beach house, the land and the accounts were to pass not by inheritance, but by trust. A trust that would activate only when betrayal surfaced. He had insisted on that clause. You'll know when to use it, he'd said, eyes calm, steady. Greed doesn't whisper, it shouts. She had protested, half laughing, half crying. You think she'd ever? He'd interrupted gently. You think she hasn't already? There had been silence then, a silence heavy with knowing. He reached for her hand and squeezed it weakly. Don't let sentiment make you blind, love, protect what we built. And then, the last thing he wrote, before folding the paper and sealing it in the envelope. If they ever betray you, let truth be your revenge. He'd slipped it into the back of the mirror frame himself, their wedding photo, his favorite. It's poetic, he'd said, smiling faintly. Let love guard what love built. The memory faded as she stood in the hallway now, the present folding around her like a closing book. She turned the frame over. The backing was firm but loose in one corner, just as it had been all those years ago. Her hands didn't shake as she pulled at the tiny nails, prying it open. A thin envelope slid free, yellowed at the edges, still sealed with his careful hand. For a long moment she just looked at it, the past in her palm, the future in her control. She tore the seal. Inside were 2 documents, one familiar, one entirely new. The first was the alternate will, the private trust deed. The second, a letter written in his distinctive, deliberate handwriting. My darlings, if you're reading this, it means the tides have shifted as I feared. You were always loyal to the heart and they to convenience. I can't blame them. The world teaches taking before it teaches love. This house, our home, was never meant to be traded like a coin. It's yours by law, by name, by right. The copy they hold is a shadow, you hold the truth. Don't burn with anger, let it cool into clarity, let truth be your revenge. Ajay. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she let herself cry, not for the betrayal, not for the loss, but for the brilliance of his foresight. He'd seen this future and built a weapon of love against it. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. Her reflection in the mirror met her gaze, eyes steadier now, clearer. The woman who had sat in shock 2 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone who remembered exactly who she was and who she'd been married to. The ocean outside crashed harder, as if echoing her pulse. She straightened the frame, wiped the glass clean and set it back on the table. The couple in the photograph smiled at her through time, a silent promise between past and present. Thank you, she whispered. I'll handle it from here. The moonlight stretched across the floor, spilling over her bare feet. She didn't move for a long while, just stood there, breathing the salt air, listening to the creak of the house settling around her. Then, with a calm so complete it felt almost sacred, she crossed to the writing desk and took out a sheet of paper. The same kind of paper her husband had used. She began to write. Her hand was steady, her heart was quiet. Outside, the waves rolled closer. The morning came pale and cold, the kind of dawn that makes the ocean look like glass. Mist drifted low across the sand, softening everything except the truth. A moving truck sat idling in the driveway, its engine a dull growl in the quiet. Boxes were stacked high inside, each labelled with words that once meant something. Family photos, kitchen memories, books, Mom's room. The daughter stood beside it, tapping her phone, scrolling, not looking up. Her husband barked orders at the movers, all business, all impatience. Mom, the daughter finally said, her voice flat with obligation. We'll call once we're settled. You'll love the new place once you see it. The mother smiled faintly. I'm sure I will. The hug that followed was quick, airless, more of a formality than a farewell. The daughter's perfume lingered after she pulled away, sharp, expensive, unfamiliar. As the truck rolled down the gravel path and disappeared around the bend, the mother stood still on the porch, her hands resting lightly on the railing. The waves whispered below, calm and endless. No tears, no trembling. Just the stillness. Then she whispered to no one in particular, "Goodbye, my dear." She stepped back into the empty house. The silence was enormous. It filled the corners, pressed against the walls. Without furniture or chatter, the house breathed again, like something that had been held underwater for too long and finally broke the surface. She walked through each room slowly, her hand grazing the doorframes, pausing by the window where her husband used to stand with his coffee. Everything was gone, the curtains, the books, the clutter of a life, and yet it didn't feel empty. It felt awake. On the table by the mirror, the envelope lay waiting. She unfolded the letter again, careful not to crease it further. The ink had faded, but his handwriting was unmistakable, firm, deliberate, beautiful in its certainty. She read it aloud this time, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger with each word. "My darlings, if you're reading this, it means they've forgotten what this house stands for. But you haven't. This home is more than wood and glass. It's proof of what we built and who we were. I've already transferred everything. The accounts, the land, the house, not in her name, not in theirs, in yours. If anyone ever claims it, let them. Let them show their hand, then show them the truth. This isn't revenge, it's restoration. Love always. Jay." Her lips curved slightly at that last line, that small, unshakable signature of the man who had built his life around her, even in death. She closed the letter and pressed it to her chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath it. Then she crossed the room to the desk, the same one where she used to write grocery lists and birthday invitations, and sat down. The phone sat there, silent, black, ordinary, but in her hands it felt like a weapon of truth. She took a deep breath, steady and full. Her voice when she spoke was calm, almost gentle. "Yes," she said into the receiver, "I'd like to report a fraudulent property sale." There was a pause. "Address?" She looked out the window at the ocean, where the horizon split the world into two halves, what was gone and what remained. Her voice didn't waver. 17 Coral Bay Road, she said. "The house isn't theirs to sell." The official on the other end began asking questions, mechanical, procedural, detached, but she didn't hear the details. All she heard was the faint sound of the waves returning to shore. As she hung up, the phone clicked softly, the final punctuation mark on a goodbye that wasn't one. Because she wasn't leaving. Not her home. Not his memory. The sea was restless that morning, grey waves rolling against the shore as if warning of what was coming. The mother sat by the window again, her teacup trembling faintly in its saucer. The house, stripped of almost everything, still felt whole. Whole in a way it hadn't for years. Then came the sound, the crunch of tires on gravel, fast and uneven. A car door slammed. Moments later, the front door burst open without a knock. Her daughter stood there, dishevelled, breathless, fury written across every inch of her face. Behind her, the son-in-law hovered, pale and anxious, followed by a man in a navy suit carrying a briefcase. The mother didn't rise, she only lifted her eyes, calm as the tide. "Back so soon?" she asked softly. The daughter's voice cracked like glass. "The sale fell through, Mom. Do you have any idea what you've done?" The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly, glancing at his notes. "Mrs. Howard, we've run into a complication regarding property ownership. It appears there's a second deed on file, one signed and verified 15 years ago, placing this house under your name alone." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "Legally, the sale cannot proceed." The daughter spun toward her mother, wild with disbelief. You tricked me, you hid this." The mother smiled faintly. "I didn't hide it, I protected it." Her daughter's voice faltered, losing volume but not anger. "You don't understand, we needed the money, the medical bills, the house payments." "No," her mother interrupted quietly, her tone sharp as broken glass. "You wanted control, you always did." The words landed between them like thunder. For a moment no one spoke. Even the lawyer shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting from one woman to the other as though witnessing something sacred and terrible. The daughter's hands shook. "I did this for us." "For you," her mother corrected. "You sold what wasn't yours, not out of need but out of pride, and now you'll have to face the truth." The lawyer, trying to regain professionalism, opened his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. "Mrs. Howard," he said to the daughter, "I strongly suggest you speak with your own counsel. Fraudulent transfer of property is a serious matter. It's best to resolve this privately." The daughter's husband stepped forward. "Can't we fix this? Pay something, sign something." Her mother rose then, slow but steady, the years falling away from her posture. "No one can fix what isn't broken. This house is mine and always was." Her gaze fell to the table, the same table where the envelope sat, still sealed, marked simply with her daughter's name. "Since you're here," she said, her voice level, "you might as well take that." The daughter hesitated, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" "Something your father left for you," the mother replied. "I was saving it for the right moment." Suspicion flickered across the daughter's face. She snatched the envelope, tore it open, and unfolded the paper inside. The lawyer glanced at his watch, uncomfortable, ready to leave, until he saw the change in her face. Colour drained from her cheeks. Her mouth fell open, eyes darting across the page. What is this?" she whispered. The mother said nothing. The daughter's hands trembled as she read aloud. "To my daughter. If you're holding this, it means you tried to sell what was never yours. Your mother built this life beside me, not you. I wanted you to have our love, not our land. But I see now you never learned the difference. We forgive you, but forgiveness does not erase consequence. Leave this house to her. She earned every stone of it." Dad. Tears sprang unbidden to her eyes, confusion and humiliation colliding. He wrote this," she stammered. "Yes," her mother said softly, "the night before he passed." The silence that followed was unbearable. The lawyer, now pale himself, quietly closed his folder. "I'll take my leave," he said awkwardly, backing toward the door. "It appears everything is well in order." When the door shut behind him, the daughter finally looked up, eyes red, lip quivering. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her mother's answer came like a wave breaking after years of restraint. "Because you wouldn't have listened. You had to hear it from him." The daughter sank into the nearest chair, the letter trembling in her lap. Her husband hovered helplessly, unsure which side to stand on. For the first time in years, the mother didn't feel small in her own home. She stood tall, the ocean's rhythm behind her like applause. The clock ticked softly. The daughter looked up, defeated, whispering, "What happens now?" The mother smiled, faint but certain. "Now you go home and I stay." Her daughter's voice cracked. "And us?" The mother turned toward the window. "That depends on what kind of woman you decide to be when you leave." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters, the house breathing again, alive and listening. The sound of paper tearing was sharp enough to cut through the silence. The daughter's trembling fingers unfolded the second page, older, yellowed, edges worn like something sacred that had waited too long to be found. Her father's handwriting sprawled across the top in deliberate strokes. "Last addendum to our will." The mother stood a few feet away, unmoving. The waves outside crashed against the rocks, steady as breath, as though the sea itself were listening. The daughter read aloud, her voice cracking with every word. "If our daughter sells without her mother's consent, she forfeits all claim to this property and its inheritance. In such a case, ownership and proceeds will transfer entirely to charitable trust, under my wife's name, for the care of widowed and abandoned women. This home must remain a refuge, not a transaction." "Robert," the paper shook in her hand, he made this years ago." Her mother nodded faintly. "He saw what was coming. You were different then, kinder, I think. He wanted to believe love would be enough." The daughter pressed her palm against her forehead, sobbing into the silence. "I didn't mean to, I just thought that you could take what wasn't yours," her mother finished quietly. "Yes, you thought, you never felt." Her daughter fell to her knees by the chair, tears dripping onto the wooden floor. "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't want to hurt you." For the first time in hours, her mother's voice softened, a fragile mercy laced with exhaustion. "Maybe you didn't mean to, but you did, and sometimes sorry doesn't rebuild what's been broken." The old clock ticked on the mantel. Each second seemed heavier than the last. The daughter stared at the letter again, her father's handwriting blurring through tears. "He wanted this house to go to charity," she whispered. "Yes," the mother said, turning toward the window where the ocean shimmered under the morning light. "He wanted it to matter, even when we're gone." The daughter's voice dropped to a whisper. "So you'll give it away?" Her mother nodded slowly. "I already have." The daughter's head snapped up. "What?" On the kitchen counter lay a small stack of papers, clean, recent, stamped with a notary seal. The mother walked toward them, her hand steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I signed them this morning," she said softly. "The beach house now belongs to the Howard Foundation for Widowed Women. It will become a home for women like me who lost everything but learned to begin again." Her daughter stared in disbelief. "You can't just—" "I can," the mother interrupted, her tone calm but final. "And I did." The daughter stood, her anger reigniting for a brief, desperate moment. "So that's it, you punish me, you throw away our family legacy." Her mother turned fully now, her face illuminated by the soft light from the window. "No, I protect it. I turn it into something good, something your father would have been proud of." The daughter's eyes darted between the letter, the documents, the ocean beyond the window. "And me?" she asked, voice trembling. "Where does that leave me?" Her mother's expression softened, not cruel, not cold, but sorrowful. "Outside," she said, "until you learn what love really means." The daughter's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came. Her husband reached for her arm gently, guiding her toward the door. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's go." She resisted for a moment, staring at the woman she had once adored, now unable to recognize. Then slowly she stepped outside. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, not a slam, not in anger, but in release. The mother stood alone in the silence that followed. She walked through the house slowly, fingertips brushing along the walls, the frames, the places that once held laughter. Every corner remembered something, a promise, a fight, a meal shared by candlelight. But today it felt different. It felt free. She returned to the kitchen table, sat down, and placed the final document in front of her, the official transfer form for the foundation. Her pen hovered for a moment. Her husband's words echoed in her mind. "If they ever betray you, let truth be your revenge." But now she didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. The pen touched paper. Slowly she signed her name, her full name, the one her husband had always loved. When she lifted the pen, the room seemed to breathe. Outside, the wind carried the scent of the sea through the open window. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, faint, gentle, like a blessing. She closed her eyes and whispered, "It's done." Ocean had learned to sing again. It began softly in the mornings, when light spilled through the windows and landed on polished floors. Footsteps echoed where silence once lived. Laughter, low, hesitant at first, now rose from the kitchen like a hymn. The beach house was no longer a monument to one family's memories. It was alive again, reborn in the hands of strangers who felt like kin. Widowed women from every corner of the coast came to stay, some clutching old photographs, others arriving with nothing but a suitcase and a story. They cooked together, planted herbs by the porch, painted seashells with their children's names. Each room carried new warmth. Each voice filled an old emptiness. The mother walked among them quietly, more caretaker than owner now. When they thanked her, she only smiled. "No," she'd say, "thank him. This was his dream, that love shouldn't end where loss begins." Outside, the garden had returned to color. Roses climbed along the fence again, just as her husband had planted them years ago, one for every year of their marriage. She knelt beside them now, fingertips brushing the petals still wet with morning dew. He was everywhere here. Not in the walls or the things, but in the peace. That afternoon, she sat at her writing desk facing the sea. The same desk where she'd once trembled over a phone call that broke her heart. Now her hands were steady. The paper before her was crisp, white, unblemished, like a fresh start. She began to write. "My dear, you were right about one thing, it was just a house. But what you didn't see was what it carried. The story of love, of patience, of every tide we survived to build it. You thought you were taking bricks and glass. I was keeping memory and meaning. I'm not angry anymore. You taught me something I never expected. That peace is worth more than blood, and that love, to remain pure, must sometimes let go. When you're ready to understand, come back, not as an owner but as a guest. The door will always open for forgiveness, not for greed. With all my heart. Mom." She set the pen down, reread the words once, and smiled. A small, knowing smile that didn't belong to the woman who once cried by this window. She folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope and sealed it with a single touch. Then she placed it on the windowsill beside a pale seashell, one her daughter had collected as a child, still marked faintly with the ink of her tiny hand years ago. The tide was rising outside. Waves reached higher, brushing the shore like fingers reclaiming what the world had forgotten. The wind slipped through the open window and lifted the edge of the letter, a whisper of movement, almost like a breath. She watched it for a long time, the sound of the sea blending with distant laughter from the garden. As dusk fell, lanterns flickered to life along the porch. Women gathered around a table, sharing tea and stories. One sang softly, her voice carrying through the air, wrapping the house in warmth. The mother joined them, her hands folded gently in her lap. Someone handed her a cup of tea. She took it, smiling. For the first time in years, she wasn't remembering, she was living. Later that night, the moon climbed high above the waves. The house glowed against the dark, a quiet light by the sea, unbroken and whole. Inside, the letter rested by the window, the seashell gleaming beside it. The tide whispered, carrying the past away. The years moved gently now, not in the rush of seasons, but in the slow rhythm of peace. The beach house stood where it always had, its white shutters bleached softer by sun and salt. New coats of paint, new flowers, new laughter. The women came and went, leaving behind pieces of their stories like sea glass scattered across the shore. Time had done what it does best, it softened the sharp edges. The mother was older now. Her hair had turned silver, her hands slower, but her eyes were the same calm tide that had carried her through every storm. That evening, the sky burned with the kind of sunset that only the ocean knows, gold melting into crimson, then into quiet blue. She sat on the porch, wrapped in her shawl, a cup of tea warming her palms. A car pulled up the gravel paths. For a long moment, she didn't move. The crunch of footsteps approached, hesitant, uneven. Then came the voice she hadn't heard in years. "Mom." She turned. The daughter stood there, older too, her confidence dimmed, her beauty softened by time and regret. There were lines around her eyes now, the kind you earn through sleepless nights and things left unsaid. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then the mother gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "Sit," she said. The daughter obeyed quietly. They sat side by side, watching the last streaks of sunlight fade across the water. Seagulls wheeled overhead, the sound of waves folding gently against the shore. There were no apologies, no rehearsed words. Just the hush between them, tender human whole. After a while, the daughter whispered, "It's beautiful here." The mother smiled faintly, "It always was." A pause, then softer still, "I didn't understand back then." "I know," the mother said, "you were chasing something you thought was freedom." "And you." The mother looked toward the horizon, her eyes reflecting the last light of day. "I stopped chasing, I started keeping." The daughter turned to her, "Keeping what?" "Peace," she said simply. The waves rolled closer now, the tide pulling in, brushing the edges of the garden. The daughter's eyes drifted toward the rows of flowers her father had once planted, roses, still blooming against the salt air. "He'd like what you did with the place," she murmured. Her mother nodded. He would have liked that it finally became what it was meant to be, a shelter, not a secret. The daughter's gaze softened. "Do they know, the women?" "They know it's a gift," the mother said, her voice carrying the faintest tremor. "But they don't need to know the price." They sat there until the sun disappeared, leaving behind only the glow of the lanterns along the porch and the soft hum of crickets in the distance. At last the daughter stood. She hesitated, as though every word she wanted to say hovered just beyond her courage. Then quietly she placed something on the small table between them. A seashell. The same one that had once sat beside a letter on this very windowsill. The mother looked at it, then at her daughter. Their eyes met, not in confrontation, but in recognition. No forgiveness was asked for, none was needed. The mother reached out, resting her hand lightly over her daughter's. "Keep what matters," she said, "let the rest go." Later, after her daughter drove away and the house returned to its evening stillness, the mother stayed on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The waves murmured below, endless, faithful. She closed her eyes and smiled, not the smile of victory but of peace. The beach house still stood, stronger than ever, not because it had survived storms, but because it had been rebuilt with purpose. It was never built on sand. It was built on lessons. And that, she thought, was the quietest triumph of all. The sea kept its promise, The house kept its truth and she kept her peace.